Welcome, everyone. We're going to give people a couple of minutes of grace period before we actually get started. Again, we're just on hold for a minute or so until 1:02, and then we'll officially get started. Thank you for joining us. Well, good morning and good afternoon. My name is Ed Warren. I am the Sage Intacct Marketing Manager here at DSD. I have the pleasure of being your host today. I'll be managing the chat and organizer features of the webinar. If you have any questions, please put them in the question panel, not the chat panel. And any emails, if you have any follow-up questions that we aren't able to cover during our session, you can reach out to us via email as well. With that, I want to welcome Caitlin Adams. She is a DSD Sage Intacct consultant. For our agenda today, we'll start with a welcome. Next, Caitlin will review how to check users and permissions, update vendors for 1099 reporting, and walk through the reporting itself. She'll then cover Sage Intacct's integration with Tax Bandits for e-filing, highlight available resources, and then we'll wrap up with a live Q&A session. Please feel free to interact with us through the questions panel. We want to make sure the session is impactful and valuable for you. And just a quick reminder, the session is being recorded, so if for some reason you have to drop or step away, no worries. You'll get a copy of the recording via email after the fact. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin.
Hello, everyone. As Ed mentioned, my name is Caitlin Adams. I am a consultant here on our Sage Intacct team at DSD. And today we're going to be going over 1099. The season is coming upon us. But before we get started with that, I did want to go over just something that, because we are coming up on year end, I know that we have a year end webinar coming up next month, but as we come up on year end, it is a best practice at the end of the year to really review your roles, your users, and your permissions within your system. So to do that, you can go to company. Based on your configuration, you might be user-based permissions or role-based permissions. So just make sure that all of your users are actually still working for you, that you have inactivated the users that aren't working at the current moment, and that all of your roles are updated with the proper permissions for your users. Now, this is old news at this point, but just a reminder that in 2024, the IRS moved to e-filing. So if you are filing 10 or more returns collectively, then you will be required to file electronically with the IRS. Previously, you had 250 copies, so it was a big drop. Again, it's something that has happened for a couple of years now, but just a reminder, because this does affect the way that you need to submit your forms to the IRS, and probably for most of our users here at Sage Intacct. Now, if you're one of the lucky ones that does get to still print paper forms, 1096s and 1099s, then you are able to order those through Sage Intacct, and they will be compatible with Intacct. You can go to the resources section of your home screen. Down here, it's highlighted in red. Checks and supplies, 1099 forms are on there. Or if you are choosing, you do have to e-file, but if you do choose to print your 1099 forms out of Sage Intacct to mail to your vendors, then you can order those through that link as well. So the first step of getting ready for 1099 season is to make sure that your company's federal tax ID is going to print on your 1099 forms. A lot of this stuff is done at configuration whenever you implement Sage Intacct, but if you did happen to add any new entities this year, or maybe change the name or something like that, just make sure that you go in and review your company information. Now, if you are a multi-entity client, meaning you have multiple entities in your Intacct environment, and you have enabled issue a separate 1099 per entity, the tax ID field will actually be available on the entity information screen rather than the company information screen. And with that being said, if you have a different legal name that needs to print on the 1099 forms than maybe the name that you have it named in your Intacct environment, you can select this red box down here. It's enable legal name and address on 1099, 1096 forms, and that will allow you to update your name and address on those 1099 forms. Second step is making sure that all of your vendors are enabled for 1099. So by going to accounts payable, vendors, there is an additional informations tab. You'll see it right there. That is where all of the 1099 information is housed. There is a checkbox that says in 1099 eligible. You will select that checkbox. You put in their tax ID and a 1099 name. We'll talk about this in just a few slides. But whenever you hit save, a pop-up box will, if it's a new vendor, will pop up. And this is where that 1099 information box information will go in. Once you hit save on that, your vendor will be enabled for 1099. If it is an existing vendor and you need to update their form or their box that is on their 1099 forms, you can select that green hyperlink right there, and that will pull up this default box information pop-up screen. This entity box, this field right here, I did want to point out that that's only necessary for beginning balances. Whenever you've gone live mid-year for Intacct, there is an import for this. This is probably something that was handled at your implementation. But you can also use this as a way to manually adjust your balances for your vendors, and we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. This is a very important slide that it looks a little confusing, but it's all about what names are going to be printed on your 1099 form. So we'll see on the next slide, there is a, on your vendor setup, you have your vendor name, and then you have your print as. That's what's printing on your checks. If your print as name and the 1099 name that we saw on our last slide are the same, then the print as name will be printed. It doesn't really matter because they're the same at this point, right? Now here in the middle, if the 1099 name is left blank, then the print as name will appear on 1099. Again, this makes sense because that is the name that is printing on your checks or your payments to the vendors. Now, if you enter a 1099 name and it is different from the print as field, then both fields are going to print on that 1099 form with the 1099 name at the top. This is used for in the instance that maybe you have a landscaping company and they have you write out checks to, ABC Landscaping. So that's their print as name, but their 1099 information is actually John Doe, the owner of that, maybe that kind of situation. Then both of those names will print on that 1099 form. Another thing that we need to talk about on a vendor is the address and the address that needs to print on the 1099 if they are different or if they are the same. So here is that print as field on the main vendor information tab I was talking about in the last slide. But here is also the address information, that primary contact. That is going to be the address that prints on the 1099 form. If they are the same, great. You don't need to do anything. If you go to your contact list tab, this tab up here, for your vendor, you'll see that you have the ability to, same as vendor, same as vendor, same as vendor, select all those different types of contacts. Now, if it is different, then we need to add a 1099 contact name. So you'll, in your contact list, add a 1099 contact. You'll put in that person's or that company's contact information, mailing information, and you'll save it. You will then select that 1099 contact on the contact list, and that will be the address that will print on the 1099 form. A note here, this is not used very often, but whenever it does, we do like to point it out. If you're utilizing vendor types and your vendor types have associated default 1099 boxes associated with them, it doesn't happen often, but it does. If you make changes to the box at the vendor level, so individually for that vendor, it will not reflect a change on the 1099. If you do need to make a change for whatever reason, so maybe I have a box 1 on my vendor type, but I need the box to be box 3 for that vendor specifically, but I still need it to have that type, reach out to us, to our team, Sage Intacct support at dsdinc.com. And we can assist you with making that change. It gets a little bit wonky. It doesn't apply to very many people. So please just reach out to us if you need to make that change. Next thing we do after we make sure all of our vendors are set up is that we review our 1099 transactions. To do this, you're going to go to accounts payable, and you can go to the 1099 report in the little report section over there on your menu. And this will allow you to review both reportable and non-reportable data before processing your 1099s to make sure you're reporting on them accurately. There are several filters that you're able to apply within that report. I highly recommend using the different filters, looking at both 1099-able transactions and non-taxable transactions. That way, you can review all of your information and make sure that it is correct and make sure that you don't need to make any adjustments. In the instance that you do need to make mass adjustments, we do have some import templates that will come into play. Just a reminder here, you can access your import templates by going to Company and Import Data. In those, the ones that we typically use during 1099 season are our vendor imports, our vendor 1099 transaction update imports, and the vendor 1099 open balances imports. You'll notice that the vendors and the vendor 1099 transaction updates, those have asterisks next to them in your Intacct environment. And that is because you're able to update information. So if a vendor is already exists in your system and maybe you need to change an address or maybe you need to change that 1099 box or form type, you can use that import template to do so without having to go manually update a lot of vendors all at once. For processing these import templates, here's just a listed out version of everything that I just mentioned. Again, this is so that you can go back and look at this information whenever you're actually running your 1099s at the beginning of 2026. After the holidays, we're all going to eat and sleep between then. So we wanted to make sure that you have this available for you. When using the vendor 1099 transaction update template, this is used to update your transactions, mostly AP bills, right, in bulk. And we do want to make sure that we point out some things about this update template. It's going to update transactions that are already tagged for 1099 treatment to a different box or form type. So maybe you had it was all that transaction, it was already marked as 1099able. It will update all transactions for a vendor to a default form type and box, and it will update the 1099 name for the vendor. Whenever you're using this transaction, the update transactions, what we want to let you know is that it will ask you for a date period to look at those transactions. That is based on the bill date, not the GL posting date, and not the paid date of those bills. The 1099 data is in fact pulling the data, the paid date data, whenever it pulls your 1099 information. However, the bill date is what is used to update the actual transactions, those transaction lines, to make them 1099able. What it will not update are imported bills that are marked as paid. It won't update the vendor opening balances. We have a way to do that. And it won't update transactions that were marked for 1099 manually whenever the vendor wasn't set up for 1099. If you want some more information on this, there is a link in this PowerPoint right here to a help section with more information about these data updates. That's very, very helpful. Please, please, please use this as a reference point whenever you go, if you're having issues updating your transactions in Intacct. And then if you can't find your information there, you can reach out to our support team. Now it's time for 1099 processing. If you are going to print your own 1099 forms or your 1096 form, if you're lucky, you can do so out of accounts payable. You go to accounts payable, print 1099 form, print 1096 form. It's pretty self-explanatory once you get in there. There is an export 1099 file. This is not in the format for e-filing with the IRS directly. So I think that's like a FIRE format. You will have to use a third party to e-file. Good news is that we have a partnership, or our Intacct has a partnership with Tax Bandits. They're a great company. We've seen a lot of, our clients have seen a lot of success when using them. So you will have we do have a third party to do this with, but we just want to point out that this will not be in that FIRE format. So again, this is all the words, just a reminder for whenever you're doing this in about a month, that this is an export file that you would then give to a third-party service, and that they would then prepare a file for the IRS in the required format. So speaking of the third party, 1099 processing powered by Tax Bandits, e-filing powered by Tax Bandits is available. They have partnered with Sage Intacct. They actually will give you, they have preferred pricing for Sage Intacct users. So for more information on this, you can search in the help section, e-file 1099 Tax Bandits. There is a whole help article that will give you more information about that. But they have a lot of things that they can do. Not only will they e-file with the IRS and your state filing, if applicable, they can even distribute copies to your 1099 recipients, and they have an online portal for your recipients to go pull their 1099s from. So what you do in Intacct is you create and modify your 1099 vendors, you do your transacting, you view your 1099 reports, then whenever you hit the export, that 1099 file, it will directly integrate with Sage, with Tax Bandits. and then they will they will validate your 1099 information and then do all of the e-filing that you need or distributing of your 1099s if that's what you choose to do. I did want to pull up, we do have some links in here that you can access later. I will pull those up right here. So here's about the 1099 e-filing with tax bandits. Again, it tells you how to set it up. This is not something that you need us to do. In fact, we can't do it for you. You're going to create a tax bandits account, and then you're just going to select a check mark in Intacct. As long as you have admin permissions, you can do that. Again, all those steps are listed out right here for you. And then here's that preferred pricing, all the different types of services that they will that they offer: state filing, federal filing, online access, and even mailing them through the postal service. All right, let me get my PowerPoint slide pulled back up here. Here we go. Again, what does the integration look like? You are going to review the information before you send it to, so it's the e-filing submission. You select the button e-file, it sends it directly over to Tax Bandits, and then you'll see all of that. They'll validate all of the information and then e-file or do whatever services that you signed up for there. Some 1099 tips. If you want to file one 1099 for a parent vendor and all of its children vendors, if you utilize the parent-child relationships between vendors, you can transfer the 1099 balances to the primary vendor record on which you want to report. So you will get a separate 1099 for all of those parents and children unless you transfer those balances over. Depending on how many you have, it might be manually updating those or utilizing that import. Again, utilize that vendor setup and beginning balancing to adjust either positive or negative. So at that vendor, whenever we went to the box form, you can select an entity and give it a little adjustment if you need to. And then to print one set of 1099 for multiple entities that share a federal tax ID. What you can do is you can create a location group. So maybe entity 1 and entity 2 have a tax ID. You have them set up separately in Intacct. What you can do is create a location group with both of those, and then you run your 1099s by that location group or that entity group at that point. And what it will do is it will print those 1099s together. If you choose to print your 1099s in-house, so not utilize Tax Bandits and their ability to handle the printing or the sending off for you, we do want to go over some printer settings. So make sure that your printer, your page scaling is set to none or to actual size. Auto rotate should be unchecked. The printers always kind of get wonky right around this time of year whenever we need them most. It is going to print, the forms already have the boxes on them, right? So it's just going to print the words. You can adjust your printing offsets if it's just printing a little bit too far up or a little bit too far down, left or right or whatever. And if a pro tip is to print it on like a regular white sheet piece of paper, hold it up to the light against those forms if you don't want to waste one of those forms. And then you can kind of see through and see how your alignment is to see if you need to offset your printing at all. Here are some more resources that we wanted to give you. If you search 1099 or 1099 guide, then in the help section, there's literally a step-by-step guide that goes through a lot of the things that I just talked about. Tying out 1099 reports with 1099 forms, ordering the 1099 forms, troubleshooting, the printers, it always happens, those types of things. These are all links on this slide that whenever this deck is distributed out to you guys, that you can go and access later. All right, and that's all I have for you today. I'm going to pass it back over to Ed to see if anybody has any questions.
Thanks, Caitlin. Really appreciate you going into so much detail and giving us a quick walk through Tax Bandits. Looks like we do have a question. Please provide link for additional help with 1099 resources updating. I think that's in your deck, right, Caitlin?
Yes, it is. It's there at the end. So I believe at the end of this, y'all are going to get a recording, and it will actually have my slide deck attached to it, so you have access to all of the links that I sent out today, or talked about today, I guess. And the best rule of thumb is to just search 1099 in your help section at the top right of your Intacct screen, and it will give you all the information that you need.
Yeah, and just for reference, when you get the deck, those links are on page 26. And that was the only question we have. Is there anyone else with a question? If not, we will say thank you for joining us, and please keep an eye out through our monthly newsletters and on our website for additional informational webinars that we offer on a regular basis. Thank you again for coming, and have a great afternoon.